Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Activate Her with me, Sally Goodwin. Good morning, good morning. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Activate Her with me, Sally Goodwin. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Activate Her with me, Sally Goodwin. It is a beautiful, windy Wednesday morning here in Cape Town. We have been experiencing the fullness of our Cape of Storms name here in the Western Cape, and it has been quite crazy the last little while. But today is, the sun is shining, the wind is blowing, but the sun is shining, and it looks a little bit better. Good morning, beautiful Bertha. Good morning. No wind on your side. Wow, okay. It is seriously windy on our side. Seriously windy. But okay, that's Cape Town for you. One never knows what one is going to get. Good morning, Chantel. Welcome, my friend. So good morning, Volno. Good morning, Jessie. Good morning, Stuart. Good morning, my friend. Thank you for the reminder, always. Good morning, Anthea. It is the 27th of September 2023, and it is the 12th of Tishrei 5784. Good morning, beautiful Berenice. Yes, welcome everybody this morning. I'm so glad. Good morning, Renee. Welcome, my beautiful friend. I'm so glad to see you all online. I have been reaching out to all of our family and friends are part of our online community who are not who are based in some of the areas that have been hit by these incredible storms, to make sure that everybody is safe. Good morning, Bronwyn. Welcome, my friend. To make sure that everybody is safe, or those people that I have contact details for anyway. Good morning, Fiona. Fabulous Fiona. Welcome, my lovely. Yes, I've been reaching out to those people that I have contact details for and that I've been able to get a hold of, just reaching out to make sure that everyone is safe and well, and that they are all okay and accounted for. And so far, everyone that I have been able to get a hold of that is part of this online family and part of this online community are all okay. They are all safe. They are all warm. They are all dry. Some of them have been without electricity for a few days. Good morning, Nalitandu. Welcome. They've been without electricity for a few days. Some of them have been without water for a few days. For some of them, their children have been unable to get to school for a couple of days, and various things have been cancelled. But they're all okay. But it has been hectic, and yeah, it's just a reminder that we are not known as the Cape of Storms for no good reason. And when the storms come, they come. So welcome, everybody. Welcome this morning. Welcome to Activate Her. Welcome, Lynn. Lovely to have you on. Welcome, Karen. Wow, that is amazing. So Karen managed to leave Montague, which was hard hit, with 30 minutes to spare. That is amazing, Karen. That is incredible. Praise Jesus. Welcome, Melanie. Yes, awesome. And just the testimonies, as always, the testimonies of God's goodness in the midst of everything is always just incredible. And that is another incredible testimony for this bright and beautiful Wednesday morning. I saw our gorgeous friend, Dr. Jenny. I saw her, oh golly, now I need to think of my days. What's today, Wednesday? I saw her on Monday. I saw Dr. Jenny on Monday. She came home to her mum and her hubby and her beautiful children. Good morning, my beautiful Charlene. She came home for the long weekend, and she is just making the most incredible recovery. And much of that, thank you so much. Much of that is testimony to all of your prayers, to those of you who have been praying, who have been standing with her in faith for a full, supernaturally fast recovery from this postpartum psychosis that she has been going through. And if I cannot share all of the testimony here in the space, and I would like to leave it to her to be able to share her testimony of everything that God has done. But God has moved. God has moved. She has been ministered to in this time, but she has been able to minister to others in this time. God has used her mightily in the spaces that she has been in during this time, and God has moved mightily. So where the enemy has thought that he has been able to come in to steal, kill, and destroy, he has once again, ladies and gentlemen, overplayed his hand, and God has actually moved, and God has just absolutely been magnificent. So Jenny was able to come home for the long weekend. She was able to spend the long weekend with her mom. Good morning, beautiful Estrelita. She was able to spend the long weekend with her mom and her hubby and her beautiful babies. And as I say, the testimonies that she shared with me when I saw her on Monday were just at the tip of the iceberg. She left and we parted ways, and she was just like, there's still so much to share. So, but it is, please, I want you, all of you, every single one of you who has stood in the gap for Jenny, every single one of you who prayed and you know, and has been praying, because many of you have reached out to me and asked me for news and asked me, you know, what is happening and what you know, what has been going on, and have continued to stand in prayer with her and for her. And so I want you to know that the testimonies and the fruit of all of this, which is going to be a glorious testimony unto God, that this is yours. It's yours just as much as it's mine, just as much as it's Jenny's. So please, I want you to receive this, and one day we will hear the fullness of the testimony of what God did over this time and what God continues to do, because it is not over yet. So please continue to stand in the gap for Jenny, continues to stand in the gap for her family, continue to stand in the gap for her children. She has gone back into care this morning. She still has to, you know, obviously follow a procedure and a process, and until she can be allowed to return home fully healed. But just her healing has been so accelerated. Her the process has been it has been not without its challenges, as we can all fully understand, but it has been so, God has been so in it every step of the way, as we know that he is. And I think the one thing that I would like to honor Jenny, and I would like to this is just a reminder for each and every one of us, when we find ourselves in spaces and places where we just you know, we struggle to understand how it happened, and where we're so tempted to say, why me, Lord, and what on earth is going on, Jesus, and where are you, God? I want to, oh golly, sorry. Sorry, I just put up a little screen here because it's very hot and sunny, and it's it is a very state-of-the-art screen, as you can see. It's simply a wooden box that I just put up to block out the sun, and it fell down and I nearly had a heart attack. Good morning, Radiant Rachel. I nearly had a heart attack. Yeah, my state-of-the-art sunblock. Sunblock. My goodness, my soul, I got such a fright. Okay, so this is the professionalism that happens in this space. In this space, ladies and gentlemen. Oh my word, okay. All right, okay. Okay, I've got such a fright. Anyway, what was I saying? What was I saying? I've lost my complete train of thought. Oh yes, I was honoring Jenny because she really just obviously once she got over the initial shock and was cognizant of where she was and what was happening with her, she really just stepped into the space of I don't understand, God, what this is all about, but I am going. But I give you my yes in this, in even in this situation. I give you my yes to use me however you need to use me. I don't understand. I don't particularly want to be here. I don't particularly want this to be happening to me, but I give you my yes. And I want you to use me even here. And so, even in the depths of despair and moments of absolute hopelessness, and kind of really just, yeah, if questioning because we are all human, she just really stepped in to what God had for her in that moment, and was willing to give God her unequivocal yes, right there and right then, no matter what. And I really believe that was just part of the acceleration process in terms of her healing, and just part of the testimony and the glory of how God has used her and is using her in this situation. So I want to honor her for that. I really, really do. I just want to honor her for that. And just another pet rant, I think, pet rant of mine. I'm going to just throw this in while I'm on the subject. I think that is where it is a bit of a problem, where when we romanticize stories in the Bible, and we make them seem like these beautiful kind of romantic love stories. And I'll take a favorite example of mine, like the story of Esther, where we kind of we make the story of Esther out to be this like beautiful, this beauty pageant, where Esther was chosen out of all the beautiful women, and and King Xerxes was this kind of tall, dark, and handsome prince, and Esther was this beautiful princess, and this beautiful love story that became the story of Esther and Xerxes. And that wasn't actually it at all. That really wasn't it. It wasn't it. If that happened today, it would have been called human trafficking. Esther, it wasn't a beautiful love story. Esther never chose to be married to King Xerxes. She basically laid down her life to be the person who was the deliverer of the Jewish people in that time. It wasn't a beautiful love story. And many of the stories in the Bible that we see as these kind of, or we romanticize in our Western mindsets, and we preach them as these kind of beautiful stories, they are stories of redemption, absolutely, and they are beautiful because they are stories of God's redemption, but they are not beautiful love stories. And they are stories of women, powerful, strong women, who said yes in the depths of the most horrendous situations. And I think we would probably be stronger and be more able to say yes in the depths of horrendous situations if we didn't live in a world that makes everything some kind of movie script. Anyway, that's not what I'm talking about today. That's just my own private soapbox thing that I tend to go on about. And that is purely because I literally heard somebody the other day speaking about a specific story in the Bible, and giving it this whole beautiful love story spin, and it wasn't a love story at all. And I was just like, oh my goodness, like that was not how it went at all. And that's my pet peeve. Anyway, but we are going to move on. So we are rejoicing because our beautiful Jenny is on the way to recovery, and we are rejoicing also. So ladies and gentlemen, I just want to prepare you, because if you watched last week's, and I said to you, like, put on your safety belts because we're in for a wild ride. And I got messages from a few people who watched last week's messages, and they were just like, this is so good, and everyone's all fired up, but they just don't know where to go from here, and they don't know what to do, and they don't know, like, and I'm just being honest with you. I'm bringing the messages that God is giving me about, returning to the eternal paths and listening for the sound of the trumpet, and we are just journeying on this road, but we don't all know exactly where we're going. Like, let's just be authentic about all of this. We are moving, we are going, we are taking one step at a time, and we are moving forward, but we don't all know exactly where the destination is, because God is moving on the earth, and he is doing things, and we don't understand always exactly what it is that he's doing or where exactly we are going, and that needs to be okay, because sometimes, if we knew exactly where we were going and exactly what we were doing, then we would try and control it, and we would try and make it look like something, and we would try and put a structure around it, and we would try and give it a framework, and we would try and do all of those things, and it would just be actually ours and not God's. Good morning, Cole. Good morning, Laura from Johannesburg. Welcome, Laura. I think I've seen you on here as a first-time visitor once before, so you are very, very welcome in this space. Welcome, everybody. And before I launch into the teaching for today, which I can tell you now is going to go on for a couple of days. In fact, I am considering adding an extra day in to these lives. I'm considering from next week, even going live on a Monday, Wednesday, and a Friday for a period of time, because I feel like there is so much that God is downloading, and I'm not getting to share it all on a Monday, on a Wednesday, and a Friday, and especially what I'm going to speak about here around the Feast of Sukkot, or the Feast of Booths, the Feast of Tabernacles, the Feast of Ingathering, and just the significance of where we are at the moment, and everything that God is doing right now. I just feel like there is so much God is downloading. There is so much that I have to thank you, Melanie. There is so much that needs to be said and needs to be shared, and I just don't have enough time. So I'm considering that. So I might add a Monday in for a period of time and just see how that goes. It's a tight squeeze, because Mondays for me are when I do assignments and exams for my degree, and so it would be a bit of a tight squeeze, but in God anything is possible. So anyway, ladies and gentlemen, please, if you would love and share, as my beautiful friend Bertha says, thank you, Karen, thank you. Okay, so if everybody would be present for it, then that would be amazing, because there's nothing worse than preaching to a vacuum. So if I know that there will be people who will show up for it, then I would be more inclined to do it. But if all of you would be loving and sharing, that would be amazing, because we live in a world where digital evangelism is a thing, and as I think it was my friend Stuart who speaks about media missionaries, and that is what we need in this hour and at this time. And so we are approaching. So we have just come out of the Rosh Hashanah, which was the head of the year. We have crossed over into the Jewish New Year 5784. And it has been prophesied as the year of the open doors, which you all know, because you would have all heard about that, and because there are many, many, many prophetic words that have gone out about that. I want to just say something, ladies and gentlemen. I want to just state something. All of these things that we talk about, all of these things that we speak about in terms of 5784, in terms of any of these days, dates, and years and things like that, even in terms of the Hebrew calendar and the year, we need to hold these things lightly. And why I'm saying this, and why I don't kind of hammer in this date and that date and specifics about things like that, is because nobody can tell you for sure that we are in the Hebrew year 5784. Nobody can tell you for sure that. So I would like you to just hold it all lightly. Even the Jewish people themselves are not 100% sure. Some of them might say they're 100% sure, but they are not 100% sure that 5784 is the correct date. The Gregorian calendar is not 100% cast in stone. There is no calendar on the earth that is 100% cast in stone. Even the Jewish people who count back their genealogies, even in this, within the scriptures, within the Torah, there are gaps in the genealogies. There are gaps in the in the ancestry. There is no definite date. Nobody can say to you it is definitely 5784 and prove it beyond a shadow of a doubt. There are debates around the year we are in, even from a Hebrew perspective. So I am fully ready to accept prophetic symbolism. I believe because God is outside of time and space, that he can work within anything, and he can speak to us from anything, and he enjoys speaking to us from within the prophetic symbolism of the Hebrew calendar. But more, I bring the Hebrew calendar forth from a more prophetically symbolic, cyclical, symbolic perspective than a carved in stone because this is where we are perspective. I think for those of us who have been laid down lovers of Jesus for a long time, we know how things can go horribly wrong when we kind of stand and put a stake in the ground in terms of this is the day and this is the hour. That has gone very wrong many, many times in history. And God is outside of time and space. God is not bound by any particular calendar. He is not bound by time. And just in the same way that Jesus says nobody knows the day and the hour that he will return except for the Father, in the same way there are many things regarding the times and the history and the ages of things that we do not know for sure. And even the people who say they know for sure don't actually know for sure. So hold those things lightly. In other words, we say it's the year 5784, and that is what we receive it as 5784. And Israel itself, the Jewish people believe that's their date, 5784. In terms of the Hebrew calendar, that's what they have it down as 5784, and the prophetic words and things are released around that, the year of the open door. Receive that. If that is what God, if that resonates with you and that is what God gives for you, receive that. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you receive something slightly differently, if God speaks to you about something slightly differently, don't be like, oh my goodness, it can't be that because this is, no, it's not cast in stone. Those dates are not cast in stone. Hold them lightly. Hold them lightly. Okay, that was my first thing that I wanted to say. Then, so now we have had Rosh Hashanah, we've had the head of the year, we've crossed over into the new Hebrew year that we've done, and we've had Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, which is, where the Jewish people believe that they find out whether their names are in the Book of Life. And so from the Day of Atonement, we now move across into Sukkot, which is also known as the Feast of Booths. It's also known as the Feast of Tabernacles. It's also known as the Feast of the Ingathering of the Harvest. Now, all of these feasts and festivals, you can kind of hang your hat on because they are detailed within the scriptures. They are detailed in what we call the Old Testament. They are detailed within the Torah, with the Torah that was given to the Israelites. So they are detailed. The feasts and the festivals are written there, and the months and the months or the times of the year that they were supposed to take place are detailed as well. So we know that we are now in the month of Tishrei, which is the 7th month of the biblical year and the 1st month of the civil year. So those are the two different things that we are in right now. And the Feast of Sukkot, or the Feast of Booths, the Feast of Tabernacles, is the 7th and final feast given to the Israelites. Now, all of these feasts represent different levels of covenant with God. and and that is something that we just often we miss as believers in Jesus. We just miss the levels of covenant. And I've spoken often on here about covenant and how God draws you deeper and deeper into covenant with him. And we've spoken over the last couple of teachings, I've spoken to you about how over this time period there is often an attack on identity, because it is over kind of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, that it's all around identity. But it is also, you might have noticed over this time period, that there has been an attack possibly on your inheritance, physical or spiritual. There has been an attack on your legacy, possibly physical or spiritual. And that is because each of these feasts, of the 7 feasts that are detailed within the Torah, detailed within the scriptures, they all represent covenant with God, but covenant on a different level. And there is blood covenant, there is inheritance covenant, and there is marriage covenant. And the head of the year, Rosh Hashanah, the Feast of Trumpets, and the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, they represent what is known as the sandal covenant or inheritance covenant. And that is, so basically in ancient times, when the ancient Israelites would, when they received their portions of land, they would use old sandals to lay out their boundary lines. So they would put an old sandal, under a rock kind of thing, because obviously if you just put a rock, then there were rocks everywhere. So how do you know that was your rock? So you would take, as an ancient Israelite, you would take an old sandal and you would put your old sandal under a rock, and or a rock on top of your old sandal, and you would lay out the boundary lines of your property that way with your old sandal. So a sandal came to represent inheritance, because obviously you would then leave your property to your children, so their inheritance was then delineated by those sandals. So a sandal came to represent inheritance covenant, which is why in the book of Ruth, Ruth's nearest kinsman takes his sandal off and gives it to Boaz as a symbol that he is giving up his claim to his inheritance, because he was Ruth's nearest kinsman, or Naomi's nearest kinsman. So he had a claim on Ruth first and the land first, etc. But Boaz comes and says he would like to, marry Ruth and take the land. And he gives up his claim by taking his sandal off and giving it to Boaz. So he's giving up his inheritance. He's giving over his sandal. So there is an inheritance covenant, which is symbolized by the sandal. So for example, when God says to Moses, take off your sandals, you are standing on holy ground. Or it's translated in our Bibles as take off your shoes, you're standing on holy ground. In some translations, they wouldn't have been wearing shoes, they would have been wearing sandals. When God says to Moses, take off your sandals, you're standing on holy ground. What God is saying to Moses, what Moses would have understood, is that you are giving up your earthly inheritance for a spiritual inheritance. Take off your sandals, whatever your inheritance was. I am giving you a different inheritance. I am giving you a holy inheritance. You are now holy and set apart. Your inheritance is now different from what you thought you had. It is now different. You are sacrificing, actually, by taking off your sandals and standing barefoot on this holy ground. You are sacrificing, actually, what would have been your inheritance here out in Midian with Jethro and your wife and, your new father-in-law and your new family. You are sacrificing that for the inheritance that I am giving you. You are called now as a deliverer to go into Egypt to bring the Israelites out. So you are giving up, sacrificing what the inheritance that you are sure of, for an unknown inheritance. And Moses, being of Israelite descent and being Middle Eastern, would have understood what that meant in terms of that sandal inheritance. So Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are known to represent, as two of the feasts, they are known to represent that inheritance, the inheritance covenant, the sandal covenant, the inheritance covenant. And then the feast of Sukkot, the feast of booths, the feast of tabernacle, is known to represent the marriage covenant. And the reason why I'm telling you all of this, and I will get to this probably in another teaching, because I can see already I'm running out of time, but I will get to another teaching, is this, that all of these feasts and festivals are represented, and I've spoken about this before, that Jesus has fulfilled some of them and is going to fulfill some of them. And so the Feast of Tabernacles will be fulfilled with the wedding feast of the bride and the lamb, which is why the Feast of Tabernacles is said to be the marriage covenant. So it will be fulfilled with the wedding feast of the bride and the lamb. That is what the prophetically the Feast of Tabernacles is said to represent. So the Feast of Tabernacles begins at sunset on the 29th of September, and it ends at sunset on the 6th of October. So it runs from the 15th to the 22nd of Tishrei. It is the 7th and final feast given to the Israelites. So 7, always a very important number in scripture, very important number to the Jewish people, to the Israelites, to God. 7, the number of completion. The 7th and final feast given to the Israelites was the Feast of Sukkot, and completion, the end of a cycle of feasts, the Feast of Sukkot. And it is used to remember the way God tabernacled with the Israelites in the wilderness, and to remember the huts or the booths that they lived in during their time in the wilderness. It's also associated with the autumn harvest, and so it became known as the Feast of Ingathering. Okay, so if we go to Leviticus 23, so I'm just going to point you to scripture so that you can see where the feast is referenced. Leviticus chapter 23, verse 39 to 43. It says here, also on the 15th day of the 7th month, so we know that the 7th month is Tishrei, the 7th month of the biblical calendar, which in the Amplified Bible it says in brackets helpfully nearly October. Also on the 15th day of the 7th month, when you have gathered in the fruit of the land, so harvest time, autumn, you shall keep the feast of the Lord for 7 days, the first day and the 8th day, each a Sabbath. And on the first day you shall take the fruit of pleasing trees and make booths of them, hence the Feast of Booths, branches of palm trees and boughs of thick leafy trees and willows of the brook. And you shall rejoice before the Lord your God for 7 days. It is a feast of rejoicing. For the Jewish people, they have now found out that their names are, or they've repented, they've done their teshuvah for 40 days. Their names are now in the book of life for another year. They can rest basically for another year. And so the Feast of Sukkot is very much, it's a feast of the ingathering of the harvest. It's very much a feast of rejoicing. And you shall rejoice before the Lord your God for 7 days. You shall keep it as a feast to the Lord for 7 days in the year, a statute forever throughout your generations. You shall keep it in the 7th month. Do you see all the sevens, all the completions, 7 days in the 7th month? You shall dwell in booths or shelters for 7 days. All native Israelites shall dwell in booths, that your generations may know that I made the Israelites dwell in booths when I brought them out of the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. That is in Leviticus 23, verse 39 to 43. And again in Deuteronomy 16, verse 13 to 15, it says, you shall observe the Feast of Tabernacles or booths for 7 days after you have gathered in from your threshing floor and wine vat. You shall rejoice in your feast. you, your son and daughter, your manservant and maidservant, the Levite, the transient and the stranger, the fatherless and the widow who are within your towns. For 7 days you shall keep a solemn feast to the Lord your God in the place which the Lord chooses, because the Lord your God will bless you in all your produce and in all the works of your hands, so that you will be altogether joyful. It's very much a feast of rejoicing, very much a feast of rejoicing. Deuteronomy 16, verse 13 to 15. God speaks about it again. But what I want to point to today, specifically what I want to point to today, and I don't think we're going to get to the end of this. I don't think we're going to get completely to the end of this today, but luckily we have Friday. But I want to point to this. So Numbers 29. So all of these books in the Old Testament, such amazing books, and we don't pay nearly enough attention to them. Numbers 29, verse 12 to 35. I'm not going to read all of it because it will take forever. But this is God giving to the Israelites the offerings that they needed to bring at the different feasts. Okay, so Numbers 29 is all the offerings that the Israelites had to bring to the different feasts, and this is the offering that they had to bring to the feast of booths, or the Sukkot, the feast of Tabernacles. Now this is the biggest offering, so it's the final feast of the 7 feasts. It's a feast of rejoicing. It's 7 days with an 8th day added on. It's a whole big thing, and it is the biggest offering. It's a bigger offering than any of the other feasts. If you read through Numbers 29 and all of the offerings that the Israelites had to bring for all of the feasts, Sukkot is the biggest offering, the most enormous offering. Okay, so Numbers 29, 12 to 35, I'm not going to read it all. You can read it in your own time. I'm just going to pull out the things that what I'm trying to get to. Verse 12, on the 15th day of the 7th month, you shall have a holy summoned assembly. You shall do no servile work, and you shall keep a feast to the Lord for 7 days. And you shall offer a burnt offering, an offering made by fire, of a sweet and pleasing fragrance to the Lord, 13 young bulls, 2 rams, and 14 male lambs a year old, and they shall be without blemish. Verse 14, and their cereal offering, okay. Verse 15, verse 16, okay. Verse 17, and on the 2nd day you shall offer 12 young bulls, 2 rams, 14 male lambs a year old without spot or blemish, okay. Verse 20, and on the 3rd day 11 bulls, 2 rams, 14 male lambs, okay. Verse 23, on the 4th day 10 bulls, okay. Are you listening? Are you paying attention? On verse 26, on the 5th day, 9 bulls. On the 6th day, 8 bulls. On the 7th day, 7 bulls. And on the 8th day, 1 bull. Okay, this is what I want to point out to you. Between the 1st day and the 7th day, 70 bulls were offered. 70 bulls were sacrificed to the Lord over the Feast of Sukkot. 70 bulls. 70 bulls. 70. It's just so exciting. We miss all of this because we just have no clue about the Hebrew context of this. I want to take you back to Genesis 10. So Genesis 10. Genesis chapter 10 is a chapter that we skip over a lot of the time because it is the history of the generations or the descendants of the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Genesis chapter 10 is known as the Table of Nations because effectively it is the grandsons of Noah. There were 70 grandsons of Noah. And basically they are known as the ancestors of nations. Each grandson of Noah, the Jewish people see as the ancestor of a nation. Because all the peoples of the earth after the flood came from Noah, from Shem, Ham, and Japheth, right? So all the peoples, if you understand it as all the peoples of the earth were destroyed by the flood, then and Noah and his wife and his sons and their wives were the only people left on the earth once God had destroyed the whole earth with the flood. Then all of the nations came from Noah's 3 sons and their wives, right? So Noah's grandsons, the Jewish people see Noah's grandsons as the ancestors of nations, that each one of Noah's grandsons formed a nation. So Genesis 10 is known as the table of nations, right? So when you speak about, and they're known as the table of nations of Gentile nations. So the Jewish people, when they see the number 70, they see Gentile nations. The number 70 represents to Jewish people Gentile nations. That's what they see, because Genesis 10, the table of nations, a table of Gentile nations, Noah's grandsons, the ancestors of nations, the ancestors of Gentile nations, because after that, God calls Abraham out as his chosen person to begin the Israelite nation, which is then the 71st nation. So 70 represents the Gentile nations. Abraham becomes the 71st nation, the Israelite nation. This is how it represents itself for the Jewish people. So they see the 70 bulls that they sacrifice at Sukkot as being a sacrifice for the 70 nations of the earth, the table of nations. And it is the most powerful thing, because the various rabbis over the ages have pointed to Psalm 109. If you look at Psalm 109, where is it? It's a psalm of David, and it's like, oh God of my praise, keep not silent, and it's all these people who, you go down to verse 4, Psalm 109 verse 4, where it says, in return for my love, they are my adversaries, but I resort to prayer. And the rabbis point to Psalm 109, and they say that at every feast of Sukkot, Israel offers 70 bulls for the 70 nations, and instead of the nations loving Israel for their sacrifice, they hate Israel. And they say that the various rabbis over the ages have said that if the nations had only known what Israel was doing in sacrificing those 70 bulls for the nations, they would have protected the temple rather than destroying it. But they didn't understand what Israel was doing on behalf of the nations of the world in sacrificing those bulls for the 70 nations. Now, obviously, ladies and gentlemen, there are more than 70 nations on the earth today. Okay, we know that. The earth is divided into a whole lot of different nations. There are 54 nations just in Africa. Now, 54 nations, Isaiah 54, God has been speaking to me about that. Can I just point that out and let that just rest in your brains? Isaiah 54, 54 nations in Africa. The Isaiah 54 women. So can I just take one brief moment to just remind you about this camp, this retreat in November that some of you have signed up for, because Isaiah 54 and the 54 nations in Africa, and we can take 70 women and the table of nations 70. God is speaking to me about the women who are coming to this camp, and 70, the table of nations, and Isaiah 54 and the 54 nations in Africa. Ladies, if you are called to nations, come to that camp. I'm not saying that lightly. Women of significance, Isaiah 54, the 54 nations in Africa, and 70, that the number of women we can take, and the table of nations. The fact that 300 people came to that event on the 19th of August, and it was the remnant, and 70 women at this camp and the table of nations, there is enormous significance around this and what God is doing right now. If you can come to that camp, to that retreat, come. If you can't come for whatever reason, please do not feel like you're excluded from this now. No, it's not some sort of exclusive little thing where if you don't make it, you're on the outside. No, if you're part of this online community and you cannot come for whatever reason, you are part of that. Like, you are part of that. Make no error. But if you can come, then come, please do, because God is doing something. There is something significant. He is moving, and it is to do with nations. It is to do with Africa. It is to do with women of significance. All of these things are significant, and I feel like I'm doing such a poor job explaining it, but it is significant, ladies and gentlemen. I want you to know this. Okay, so we have this table of nations in Genesis. We have this 70 bulls sacrificed over Sukkot. Then we have, so Exodus If we go to Exodus 24, verse 9 to 12, Exodus 24, verse 9 to 12. And I'm going to digress here. And this is probably where we'll end today, I would imagine. Because I'm going to digress here because I want you to get all of this. We are going somewhere. I promise you we are. And we're going to go more there on Friday and then probably more there next week, Monday. But by the end of Sukkot, you are going to get all of what God is saying over this period of time. And I'm hoping that the fire that began last week is going to just be spreading and spreading and spreading because this is so significant. But I want to take us to Exodus 24, verse 9 to 12. So when you understand the way the Jewish people read these things, because this is how they see these things, this is how they are taught to see these things. When they see the number 70, it is like they see the fact that 70 Gentile nations, that's what they see. And Israel, the 71st nation. Okay, so here we go. Exodus 24, verse 9 to 12. Moses, Aaron, Nadab, and Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel went up the mountainside. Moses takes 70 elders up Mount Sinai. Those 70 elders represented a table of nations that Moses takes up Mount Sinai to have a covenant meal with God himself. That is what the fact that Moses took 70 elders and not 60 or 40, or because numbers, you need to understand that the Hebrew alphabet, the way that the Hebrews wrote back then, pictographic, alphanumeric, these things all meant something to them. Much more. We have lost so much in the Western world. We just don't pay attention to the things that they paid attention to in those days. Names, numbers, signs, symbols. They lived in a world without technology. Their technology, that was their technology. Things like that were significant for them. Names and numbers, signs and symbols, signs in the sky, that was where significance lay for them. That would have been significant for them. 70 elders. Moses wouldn't have just sucked the number 70 out of his thumb. He took 70 elders up to Mount Sinai for this covenant meal with the Lord. That 70, he would have been known because of Noah and Noah's 70 grandsons being the ancestors of nations, representing the table of nations. That would have represented for Noah a table of nations. Because remember this, it wasn't only the Israelites that came out of Egypt. There were Egyptians. There were other people that came out of Egypt with the Israelites. There were other nations, Gentile nations, that they had gathered along with them as they journeyed. It wasn't only the Hebrew people. There would have been mainly Israelites, absolutely, mainly Israelites, but there were other Gentiles that had decided to go with them. Egyptian people who had seen the power of the God of Israel and decided to leave Egypt with them. And then other Gentile nations who had been in Egypt, who gathered with the Israelites as they left. It wasn't only the Israelites that were gathered there. And so there would have been Gentiles amongst them, in the minority, but there were Gentiles amongst them. So those 70 elders that Moses took up the mountain to have a covenant meal with God, they would have been Israelites, absolutely. But they represented more than just the Israelites. They represented all the people who had gathered at Mount Sinai. Gentiles included. They represented a table of nations. I'm just going to read this because this is just amazing. They saw the God of Israel. They saw the God of Israel, and under his feet it was like pavement of bright sapphire stone, like the very heavens in clearness. And upon the nobles of the Israelites he laid not his hand, to conceal himself from them, to rebuke their daring, or to harm them, but they saw the manifestation of the presence of God and ate and drank. They saw these 70 elders of Israel went with Moses up the mountain side, up the mountainside, and they had a covenant meal with the God of Israel. They saw under his feet a pavement like bright sapphire stone, and they ate and drank in the manifestation of the presence of the God of Israel. And then Moses rises up with Joshua and goes up into the mountain with God. And he says to the elders, wait here for us. Aaron and Hur will look after you while I go into the glory of God and receive what God has for us. And what do? They build a golden calf. They have spent time in the actual presence of God. They have eaten a covenant meal with the Almighty God, creator of the universe. And they build a golden calf. Anyway, they represented the table of nations. That's what they did. Okay, I'm going to stop there because there's so much, and if I go any further, then we're going to be here for another hour. So I'm going to stop right there. But what I want to say to you is this. On Friday, I think it is, Wednesday the 27th, yes, at sunset on Friday, we basically begin the Feast of Sukkot. So it is a very significant time. It is a very exciting time. I want to see you on Friday morning. We're going to carry on with this. The whole of next week, because the Feast of Sukkot runs right through the whole of next week. It is such a significant time, ladies and gentlemen. I am so excited for what God is doing, for how he is moving, for the significance of the times we are in right now. I love you. Bless you all. Have a superb Wednesday. And I shall see you all on Friday morning. Don't forget to like and share. Don't forget to invite your friends. It is a time of rejoicing, ladies and gentlemen. No matter where you are, what you're doing, it is a time of rejoicing. Love you all. Bless you. Sign up for the camp. Buy the book. Sign up for the camp. Love you.